hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me this evening for my virtual masterclass. Um, so, what I'm going to do this evening is, as you hear, I'm going to reminisce on one of my loves, that being Broadway. Broadway, and we can't wait to get back to Broadway. By the way, I'll talk a little more about that as well later. But before we get started, I want to first say a huge thank you to NJPAC for bringing such a program as this, to not only allowing me to be a part of it, but to the community of folks who love music, who love Broadway things and all the things that NJPAC offers to the community. And also a huge thank you to TD Bank for their support of programs such as this and all of the jazz programs that they help support at NJPAC. So huge thank you to them. And just for me personally, another thank you to Craig Pierce and Latoya Dawson for being wonderful colleagues at NJPAC, but also helping to on the back end of what we're doing here this evening. So thank you to them both as well. Broadway. Now, the great thing I love about Broadway, especially being a jazz musician, is how so many iconic jazz tunes have come out of Broadway musicals. Some are more familiar to us, to me, to others, and some not so familiar. But before we dive into those tunes, just a little bit of backdrop about Broadway. Now, New York did not have such a significant theater presence until about 1750, when actor managers Walter Mary and Thomas Keene established a resident company at the theater on Nassau Street. And that theater particularly it housed about 280 people maximum. They presented Shakespeare plays, ballad operas, things such as The Beggar's Opera in 1752. William Hallam, one of the managers during that time, he sent a company of 12 actors from Britain to the colonies with his brother Louis as their manager. Now, they established a few theaters down in Williamsburg, and they opened with a production called The Merchants of Venice. So, again, Broadway, the 1700s, 1752. But it wasn't until about, those theaters were kind of operative for a while until the Revolutionary War came. And then, of course, that halted all of that. And it wasn't until after that that Broadway theaters established themselves again. Now, the interesting thing about that, okay, what that establishment, it was around 1798 that the theaters came back, and that particular theater was about a 2,000 seat theater called the Park Theater, and it was built on Chatham Street. Now, for the New Yorkers who may be listening and those familiar with New York, nowhere near Midtown Manhattan. In fact, it was in the lower Manhattan area near the financial district. That was where the theaters were, Broadway theaters, down in that area. But it wasn't until probably, and again, the things that were being presented were a lot of Shakespearean, more operatic kind of productions. But it wasn't until, I guess, almost after the Civil War that the theaters moved to Midtown Manhattan. And that was probably around 1850, the beginning of 1850. And the reason really was because the real estate was a lot cheaper in Midtown at that time. Nothing like that today. If you're trying to build a theater or anything in Midtown Manhattan today, forget about it, unless you got a lot of money. So the theater that was built around that time was the, let me back up here. So it was around at the beginning of the 19th century. The area that comprised the theater district was owned by a handful of families and companies that owned a few farms. And it was in 1836 that the mayor, Cornelius Lawrence, opened the 42nd Street Theater and invited Manhattanies to enjoy the atmosphere of theatrical productions. But as we know now, there's over 41 theaters in Midtown doing all kind of wonderful productions. And again, going back to my original thought, as a jazz musician, I thought, wow, it's so many wonderful jazz iconic tunes that musicians play, and some maybe not realizing where they had come from. For instance, this is one right here. Of course, that being the iconic song Body and Soul. Now, Body and Soul was a great song written by Johnny Green, who was a Hollywood songwriter and conductor. And he wrote that song for a British actor named Gertrude Lawrence. Gertrude Lawrence. But it wasn't until around the 1930s that that tune became popular from a Broadway show called Three's a Crowd. Of course, I should speak for myself. Never heard of the show, never heard of the show, but for sure I heard of Body and Soul. And again, as a jazz lover, jazz musician myself, some of my iconic renditions of that song is played by the great Coleman Hawkins. Um, he kind of quoted at the melody and then sort of just started improvising. That was around one of his iconic recordings of that was around 1939. But a great musician, some 30 years almost later, by the name of Eddie Jefferson, put lyrics to it. Now, the style of, he was kind of not really a scat jazz singer. They call it vocalizing, where he would take the solo of a jazz player and put words to it. Don't you know he was the king of saxophone? Yes, indeed, he was. I'm talking about the man that made it sound so good. Some people called him by his name, Bean, but Hawkins was his name. I can't remember all the songs. Anyway, check out those two recordings. Again, just fantastic, fantastic. But again, it came from a musical called Three's a Crowd. And I should also note that if during the course of this, feel free to, if you want to make a comment or you have a question about some of the things I'm saying, or even, offer some backdrop and insight to some of the things I'm talking about, please do so in the Q&A. But we will also have time at the end to kind of really formally talk about some of the things that you may want to talk about. Body and Soul, another great iconic jazz tune, if you will, is one called All the Things You Are. Now, All the Things You Are was from a Jerome Kern musical called Very Warm for May. It was a musical that opened on Broadway in 1939, and it closed only after 59 performances, which could mean several things. Having done a lot of Broadway shows, it could mean either that the show was not very good, or for whatever other reasons, it closed early. But, again, do I remember Very Warm for May, Broadway musical? No. Do I remember All the Things You Are? And of course, again, a song like that, when I think of my favorite musicians who played that song, Charlie Parker immediately comes to mind. Um, I think it was a recording Charlie Parker did with a big band. I can't recall what the ensemble was, but I mean, it really doesn't matter. Anything Charlie Parker played is going to be fantastic for sure. Um, Another great tune, great ballad that came from a musical. Again, these are songs that were written around in the 30s. This was from the Ziegfeld Follies of 1936. It opened on Broadway at the Winter Garden Theater. This is a great ballad called "I Can't Get Started." Of course, the Broadway review, it only had about 100 or so performances before it closed. But think of the countless musicians who's recorded this song. Lee Morgan, Kenny Dorham, of course, my favorite, Cannonball Adderley, and so many others. I've flown around the world in a plane. I fought a revolution in Spain. Man, I tell you, if I could sing, and I'm sure there's a version floating around somewhere of Nat King Cole singing that song. But man, if I could sing like Nat Cole, I don't know, NJ Pack, I think we have to do a Mark Rose cabaret night. Great song though. I can't get started. Again, another great song. This one comes from Britain's radio sweetheart #1 singer, Elsie Carlisle, which introduced this song, which is "What Is This Thing Called Love," to the London Pavilion on March the 27th of 1929. Now, the song was performed as a part of a Broadway, which came to Broadway later, a Broadway musical. In fact, it came to Broadway, I think that same year of 1929, a musical called Wake Up and Dream. It was a review. Of course, the composer who's penned many iconic songs that have come out of Broadway musicals, speaking of the great Cole Porter. And this song, again, in fact, in that same musical, Wake Up and Dream, there's another great song that came out of that musical. Of course, I'm talking about What Is This Thing Called Love. And the other one was one that the great Ella Fitzgerald recorded. entitled "Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love." Bees do it, fleas do it, even educated. Oh, I'm messing up the lyrics. Even educated fleas do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love. But I'm speaking of what is this thing called love? What is this thing called love? And again, speaking of jazz musicians that I personally love, I cannot get away from my all-time favorite, Cannonball Adderley. But there's another one um, that I think is worth checking out. The great Wynton Marcellus, dear friend of mine, wonderful friend to NJ Pack, um, with so many times he's been to NJ Pack to do concerts and um, the Ralph Ellison piece he collaborated with NJ Pack on doing. But there's a recording that he did where he played that song, and it's called Live at the House of Tribes. It was around the early 2000s, around 2005. Of course, Wynton Marcellus sounds fantastic, but as an alto player, there's a cat on that record that played many years with Wynton, good friend Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson. Wessel Anderson. If you don't know that name, you should. No, but if you don't know that name, do yourself a favor and check out Wes Anderson. And if you can, check out this recording I'm talking about, Live at the House of Tribes. What is this thing called love? Wynton Marcellus solos first, which of course is just fantastic. But my ear always goes to the alto players, and Wes Anderson just sounds like $1 million on that recording. Amazing. This next song, Yesterdays. Yesterdays was introduced to the New Amsterdam theater audience. This was a song included in the score of a Broadway musical called Roberta. That show went on to have a very successful run. It had about 295 performances. And of course, the song Yesterdays was an instant hit inside the musical, but it had great success outside of the musical as well. And one of my favorite renditions of that song is recorded by the phenomenal pianist Art Tatum. Art Tatum was a blind pianist, and the story that I heard about Art Tatum and just his just magnificent prowess on the piano was that his when he was a young lad, his father took him to a concert, and he's listening to the piano players play, and then he got back home and he started trying to play remember some of the things that he had heard and playing some of the things he had heard. And his father kind of came into where he was playing and was like, Art, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm just trying to play, remember what I heard at the concert. And his dad told him, he says, don't you know that was two piano players? Because the amount of music that Art Tatum was playing, his dad just couldn't believe it. And Art Tatum thought, I'm just trying to play what I heard. I didn't know it was two piano players. But on that there's a recording that he did around 1964 where he plays a rendition of Yesterdays that's just unbelievable. And the tune is, I'm not gonna, of course, I wish I could. I'm not gonna play like Art Tatum, but this is the melody. This is the tune. Yesterdays. Now, of course, I first fell in love with Broadway and tunes of Broadway. Um, my first introduction into my professional career was actually being on the road during a Broadway production of one of Duke Ellington's musicals called Sophisticated Ladies. Now, I went to school in Boston. I was a student at Berklee College of Music, and I graduated in 1988, the fall of 1988. And I remember it like it was yesterday. After I graduated, I just got the thought of what is my next step gonna be hit me like a ton of bricks, and I find myself walking down Huntington Avenue, and right near. Well, first, the great thing about Boston is one, that's where I met my wife. But also, it's just so many wonderful schools. It's like a college town. It was just a great experience to be in college in Boston at that time. So I graduate. Berkeley was very near the Boston Conservatory. It was near the New England Conservatory. Across the bridge was MIT and Harvard, all these schools. So I'm walking down Huntington Avenue thinking like, what am I going to do? And I find myself walking into the New England Conservatory. And at that time, when you walked in, right on, they had a cork board with a lot of advertisements for different things there as you walked in, and I see this sign, auditions for a road production of a Broadway musical. We called them bus and trucks because that's basically how you traveled. The cast and the band was on a bus. The set design and the audio equipment was on a truck. You just travel all up and down the countryside. Bus and truck for Broadway musical, having auditions. So I said, okay, great. I ripped off the number. I called the number. I scheduled an audition. Long story short, the audition went fairly well, but at that time, I called the company manager, and he told me, he says, "Well, we have one more stop before we decide, make our final decisions, and the last stop we're going to have auditions is in New York City." And of course, I thought, "Oh, they're going to New York. Forget it. What am I gonna? I guess I'm gonna go back to Baltimore and figure it out." So anyway, they go to New York. They hold auditions. A week go by, 2 weeks, and also they said they would call me and let me know what the outcome would be. So they hold their auditions in New York. A week, 2 weeks go by, and I don't hear anything from them. And so I called the company manager again just to find out what was going on. And he told me, he says, "Well, we're considering one other person, but we're waiting to see what he decides before we make our final offer. But know that if he doesn't decide to do it, the job is yours." And I was thinking to myself, please don't, not that I wish ill on anybody. I was like, please break a finger or break your reed. I don't know. Don't take the gig. And sure enough, he decided he was not going to take the gig. He got an offer for something else, and he decided to do that. And of course, I got the job. Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, the person who was being considered for that Sophisticated Ladies bus and truck tour was the guy I mentioned just a while ago who played with Wynton Marcellus, Wes Anderson. Wes had auditioned for Wynton at the time. Wynton had a small band, small group. This is pre Jazz at Lincoln Center, any of that. And Wes Anderson got the gig with Wynton, and so I got the job with this Broadway musical. And also the great thing about it is it was a European tour. So I toured Europe for about 10 months, 10 straight months. I mean, we must have went to 14, 15 different countries. I saw every inch of Europe in that year. So again, right out of college, 2 months later, I find myself in Europe for almost a year. Unbelievable experience. 21 years old, traveling all through Europe. It was just an unbelievable experience. And of course, it's so many layers to that story because as it would happen, as fate would have it, I wound up getting the gig with Mercer Ellington once I moved to New York. But I digress a little bit. The songs that came out of that music, it's kind of hard to say the success of these songs were because of the musical, because persons such as Duke Ellington, who's penned thousands, literally thousands of songs for different things, musicals, movies, operas, suites, just about any kind of configuration of something that would need music. Duke Ellington has scored for that. But of course, the most iconic one is the one that bears the title of the musical, Sophisticated Lady. Sophisticated Lady. Mercer Ellington. In fact, that show was on Broadway, in fact. And again, I think about not only the tunes that a lot of these musicals have kind of uh, offered to the jazz community, to the world, particularly jazz musicians, but some of the unbelievable dynamic cast and musicians who were a part of that. Of course, that particular one, just a few that come to mind: Judith Jameson and Gregory Hines, of course, conducted by Mercer Ellington with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. And I think later in the run in the production of that musical, the phenom, again, Gregory's brother, Maurice Hines, joined the cast. So you got like these unbelievable songs and cast members and musicians that have played on Broadway. And it's funny too, because a lot of times there's sort of a disconnect in terms of people thinking Broadway musicians are one thing, or jazz musicians are one thing, or actors for that matter. They don't do Broadway, they do film and television. But Broadway, I think, is one of the platforms that is respected by all artists, because it just offers itself to such great creative work and collaborative work, which again is why we gotta. I can't wait till we can get to the other side of this pandemic to get Broadway back up and going. So during that show, 10 months, I'm on the road doing Sophisticated Ladies. Of course, my goal and my ambition is to get to the Big Apple, get to New York City. So after the run of that show, I moved to New York. I moved to Brooklyn. And it so happened again that the MD, the music director for Sophisticated Ladies, Reginald Royal is his name. He got an offer to do a Broadway show once we got back to New York. And thank goodness for me, I was in his good grace, not only as a good, solid musician, but a good person. He called me and asked me would I be interested in doing this musical. And I said, absolutely, I would. And I told him, I says, well, what's the show? And he said, well, it's a show about the music of a great saxophone player named Louis Jordan. The show is called Five Guys Named Mo. And at the time, I was familiar a little bit with Louis Jordan, but of course, that made me start to really think about and to check out Louis Jordan and really check him out to the point where he was, to me, and we can argue about it or have a discussion about it. He was kind of the blueprint for rock and roll. I mean, Louis Jordan, he was a great entertainer, but his music had such strong grooves about it, and dance. It was like, it wasn't just like I'm gonna play a tune and take a solo. He was a great entertainer, and his tunes were just great. And his titles were interesting too. Of course, the iconic Five Guys Named Mo, but there's one tune he wrote called "There Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens." There ain't nobody here but us chickens. There ain't nobody here at all. So quiet your stuff and stop that fuss. There ain't nobody here but us. We chickens trying to sleep and you butt in and hobble, hobble, hobble often. It's a sin. Tomorrow is a busy day. We got things to do. We got eggs to lay. We got ground to dig and worms to scratch. It takes a lot of sitting getting chicks to hatch. There ain't nobody here but us chickens. There ain't nobody here at all. So quiet yourself and stop that fuss. There ain't nobody here but us. So kindly point that gun the other way and hobble, hobble, hobble off and hit the hay. He was a bad dude. So again, I'm sure you're familiar with Louis Jordan, but if you're not, check him out and the songs that came out of that song. And again, for me, fortunately, I work with some amazing. So the whole premise of that show, Five Guys Named Mo, there was a character named Nomax. And Nomax's character was he kind of had just had broken up from a relationship, and he was consulting these five guys as to how to navigate into his next thing. And of course, the guys were Big Mo, Doug Eskew, Little Mo, God rest his soul, Glenn Turner, Fuad Mo, Milton Craig Neely, No Mo, Kevin Ramsey, uh, Eat Mo, Jeffrey Sams. I think I'm forgetting all of the guys. Anyway, phenomenal actors. And again, courtesy of me doing the road show, Sophisticated Ladies, courtesy to Reggie Royal, I got the call to do my first Broadway show. Um, After that, I did another show again, courtesy. And the great thing too about like this, the not only the tunes that have come out of these musicals, these are tunes that cats still play today. A lot of iconic songs. Frank Sinatra, of course, recorded a lot of these wonderful tunes. Come fly with me, come fly away. So many iconic tunes. But once I got sort of in that inner circle of Broadway, it started leading to other opportunities. And again, very fortunate for me, um, I was referred to one of Broadway's finest contractors and a great bass player, um, John Miller. I call him Miller Time, who contracts a lot of Broadway shows. And he called me for this show. It was a show called Cat and the Kings, which was really a show about um, a doo-wop group from South Africa. Kind of, if you're familiar with Jersey Boys, it's kind of that, but kind of based in South Africa. And the cast were actually from South Africa. So it was really great and interesting to hear them sing that kind of style of music with that South African flavor to it. And of course, after that, that led to which a show I thought had too short of a run because the cast and the music of it was just outstanding. It was a show called After Midnight. Now, if you didn't see that show, it's well, it didn't. I think it should have ran much longer than it did. But the cast in that show and the music that came out of that show um, was just phenomenal. Dule Hill, Fantasia, Desmond Richardson, so many unbelievable people. And the band itself was a band that Wynton Marcellus had sort of handpicked himself. He and Andy Farber put together this wonderful big band that played all these great tunes, such as this one here. It didn't come from this musical, but it was featured in the musical. And I love this tune. This is called On the Sunny Side of the Street. And if you saw the show, this was one of the features that Fantasia would sing. And man, she would just kill it every night. On the Sunny Side of the Street. And of course, one of my favorite renditions of that is Dizzy Gillespie and Sonny Stitt. They did a fantastic version of that. After I did that musical, I did another, again, unbelievable musical by UB Blake and Noble Sissel. Before I get into the show, now I grew up in Baltimore. UB Blake, of course, being such a phenomenal musician, composer. The high school I attended, UB Blake, who was still alive at that time, had a house very near the school that I would go to. Um, and what I would do is I would walk by his house almost on a regular basis. I would say, there's the house with UB Blake. And at that time, I didn't know any better. I'd say, oh yeah, that's where that piano player dude lives. UB Blake, right? All right. UB Blake, one of his most historic musicals was a show called Shuffle Along. Now, Shuffle Along was put on Broadway, and it really wasn't on Broadway. It was on, at the time, I think it was around a theater on 57th Street. And we're talking about like the 1910 teens, maybe a little earlier. It was the first musical that was entirely featuring Black artists. The music was written and composed by Black artists, UB Blake, Noble Sissel. The entire cast was a Black cast. The entire band was it was an all Black production. And it went on to produce to the world some young and up and comers, a dude by the name of Paul Robeson. You may have heard him. And this up and comer dancer, singer named Josephine Baker. This was what Shuffle Along produced on Broadway. So the show had a short run. Then, fortunately, it was put back on Broadway about 2016 with the same premise. It was, Black director, Black choreographer. In fact, one of NJ-PAC's own, the amazing Savion Glover was the choreographer. All Black cast, such people as Brian Stokes Mitchell, Audra McDonald, Billy Porter, so many unbelievable actors. The band was unbelievable. One of the songs that I love out of that show is a song that was featured, of course, and had a good success in the show, but it really got a good second kind of success during the 1948 presidential run for a guy by the name of Harry Truman. And this song is called I'm Just Wild About Harry. I'm Just Wild About Harry. I want to mention again, if you have any questions or comments, or, let me know you're out there. If you're enjoying what I'm talking about, please feel free to add your comments or questions in the Q&A tab. But remember, Probably in another maybe 2 minutes or so, I'll open it up for questions. The last after I just shuffle along, 2016, 17, somewhere about, again, a show that just had too short of a life. um that show was just amazing, amazing. But I'm currently doing a show when we can get back to Broadway, so let's all keep putting out the energy, and also just kind of posting why Broadway is important, not just for myself, but it's a form of entertainment, live entertainment. We need to get back to live entertainment, whether it's on the stage at NJ Pack, on Broadway, or some other theater or a jazz club somewhere. We need to get that back, that important, vital part of our community back alive. Currently, I'm doing a show about the music of the unbelievable Temptations. It's a show called Ain't Too Proud: The Life and Times of the Temptations. Again, fortunately for me, I've been watching the baton of probably some of the best, they just so happen to be black artists, but some of the best musical directors on Broadway. Reginald Royal, Daryl Waters, Shelton Beckton, currently Kenny Seymour, um, Zane Paul. I mean, these brothers, Joseph Joubert, these brothers are no joke, and I've been fortunate to be under their baton. So 8 times a week, playing the music of the iconic Temptations, I'm watching the baton of Kenny Seymour, and you know, iconic songs such as "My Girl," "Get Ready," "If You Don't Know Me by Now." Um, of course, "Ain't Too Proud." One that I like is kind of a ballad, "Just My Imagination." And of course, the showstopper. Ain't Too Proud. Wonderful, wonderful shows. Again, Broadway has offered to jazz players some wonderful, wonderful tunes that we consider classic tunes. Before we close, I want to take a moment to open this up for any questions or comments that you all may have for me. So I'm going to ask my uh, dear colleague. Um, let's see. I'm looking at some of the questions here. From Nick Schubel. My good question. No question. Just wanted to say you sound beautiful. And Leo Nikki and I are enjoying learning about the background of these tunes. Thank you. No, this guy here, Nick Schubel, great drummer, great friend, and his daughter. She's one of ours. She's a Jazz for Teens student. We miss you, Lil Nikki. I'm sure you're doing fantastic things, and look forward to being able to come out and hear you live soon. Michael Morocho, another great Jazz for Teens alum. Hello, Mr. Gross. What are your impressions on learning the unknown obscure Broadway tunes and bringing them forward into the jazz scene in your own albums for the recognition that it deserves to be seen as a popular jazz standard? Unknown Broadway tunes such as "Wonderful, Wonderful," yep, namely "You," "The House I Live In," "Toot Toot Tootsie," "All the Things You Are," and Gyoko Moro. you, etc. Personally, for me, it's always the unknown, obscure standards that capture my ear. I agree, Michael Morocho. Of course, well, think about it. What makes a tune popular? What makes a tune a standard? It starts out, relatively as an unknown tune, but the more people play it and the more we publicize it, the more it becomes known and becomes a standard. So again, tunes resonate with me, not so much because they're popular or that they're unknown for that matter, but more because they're great tunes. Um, let's see, what else do we have here? Russell Edwards, Dee Dee Bridgewater. Oh yes, Dee Dee Bridgewater in Sophisticated Love. Yeah, again, musicals like that, it's so great to look at the playbills and see all of these unbelievable stars, and to kind of trace their trajectory. Even now, you'll go to Broadway, and it's nothing to see David Allen Greer come back and do a Broadway musical. Denzel Washington come back, and Lawrence Fishburne, or Mark Gross. All the greats. You know what I'm talking about. Isabella, nice. Thank you, Isabella. Laura Site, fabulous. Laura has a wonderful student, also part of the JFT family, Victoria. Shuffle Along was amazing. Yeah, Valerie. I saw it several times. The entire cast of musicians were great. Too short of a run. Couldn't agree more. Mayu, thank you, Mayu. Great class. Mayu is a wonderful flautist. Was on my last recording, the Plus Strings record. David Durkin, hey David, we're about the same age, so I know that rap, rock, funk were the popular music genres when we were growing up. So what initially attracted you to jazz and Broadway? Well, interestingly enough, David, I grew up, I'm the youngest of 7, and there was always music playing in my house. And my sisters and brothers, we all played something musical. So it wasn't so much that I was attracted, I sought out jazz or Broadway. It was just that was what I was exposed to. Not that I wasn't also exposed to, pop music, popular music, soul music. My older brothers, they're the ones who introduced me to groups like the Temptations and Curtis Mayfield and the Isley Brothers, and Grover Washington Jr. and all that stuff. And of course, my mom and dad, they love gospel music. So I also grew up loving, and still do, Mahalia Jackson and the Clark sisters and things like that. So I think if, for all the young artists on the page here, the musicians, or just in general, the best thing you can do for yourself is to expose yourself to as much of this as you possibly can. It's going to weed itself out, and it's going to find its place in relevance in terms of what your path and trajectory is. But the best thing you can do is just expose yourself to it. Again, I grew up listening to funk music, rap music. In fact, at my high school, which he was much younger than I went to the Baltimore School for the Arts. A few years after I graduated, a young fellow by the name of Tupac Shakur was a freshman at my high school. So, it was that kind of an environment and in schools that offered me opportunities to learn. And in fact, again, I wanted to be a classical saxophonist. I thought I was going to be a concert saxophonist. I can't remember it. I wanted to play all that stuff. But again, the great thing about it is that experience taught me and made me aware of the importance of how to emote, how to have a beautiful sound and play a melody that makes people feel it, and not not get all theoretical and heady about it. But if you can't touch a person and make them feel what you're feeling, you're doing something wrong. You need to step back and re-examine what it is you do. Tiffany, hi Mark. Wow, look the same after all these years. Wow, you need to wipe off your screen, Tiffany. I don't know. I might look the same, but I don't feel the same sometimes. And during your historical journey with my oldest son, Justin. What's going on, Justin? Love the wonderful jazz tunes. Thank you for sharing. My son wanted to know if there are any summer internships at NJPAC, go to our website, Tiffany, and look, because again, particularly since we're in this COVID space right now, a lot of what we're doing at NJPAC is remote. But that's not to say that there aren't some opportunities there for your son. So I would advise you to go to njpac.org and see if you can find something there, or you could private DM me as well, and I could try to offer some more advice to that. Evan, you sound amazing, and you bring a world of enthusiasm to the history. Inspiring. Thank you, brother. History is so important. If you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. That's what I was told, by folks such as James Moody and, Jimmy Heath. And I actually was on the road for 2 weeks with Dizzy Gillespie. And each night I would talk to him about music and what it was like for him growing up, particularly about Charlie Parker and things like that. And he just gave me such great information. And again, you think about a guy like Charlie Parker, he would often play a lot of these so-called Broadway tunes. April in Paris. And he would sing it like that. And I think of the words, April in Paris, chestnuts in blossom. Oh, I'm forgetting the words now. Let me stop while I'm ahead. Kim Honeyford. Hello, Kim. Wonderful to listen to you. Not a question, but a request. Any chance you see that bass clarinet back there? Oh, Ben is dead. Oh man. The reed on that bass clarinet probably looks like a Pringles potato chip right now, so I'm afraid to touch it. Let me see. Now, mind you, this reed for the saxophone, Michael Morocho, you understand this. If the reed is not a certain way, it could go either way. So we'll see. That's about as good as it's going to get right now. Of course, again, talk about a great person like Duke Ellington, right? Mood Indigo, or as Mercer would call it, Moody Magoody. Patrick Clark, thank you so much for such an informative and well done webinar. My pleasure, my pleasure. And I think there's a couple of other questions I'll see if I can get to over here. Gerald Dotson, thank you very much for your time and talent. My pleasure, Gerald. Tracy Burgess, what's up? No question, comment. I am 10-year-old sax player, and I enjoyed this very much this evening, Benji. 10 years old. That was, I got started playing when I was probably about 7 or so. That's a great age. That's a great age to start playing. And if I could give you any one quick little tip of advice for playing at that age, just have fun. Enjoy it. Play it as much and as often as you can, but just have fun. It's going to take care of itself, because what I found, of course, I was 10 5 years, I was 10 5 times. And reflecting back on that, the best advice I can give any young person is to just enjoy, play your instrument as much and as often as you can, but just enjoy it. Don't start, you know, critiquing yourself and putting yourself under microscope. Enjoy it. It's going to take care of itself, because the more you love it, the more you're going to want to play it, and the more you love it, the more you're going to just instinctively get better and want to get better. But you got to have that love. Don't put that love and that passion out. Just enjoy it. you know well, I think that's about all the time I have for you. But before we go, another song from a Broadway musical. This is going to be a blindfold test. I'm going to see if you can recognize what this is. The party's over. I want to thank you all, and again, I want a huge thank you to NJPAC. You can always go to njpac.org and find out other wonderful things that NJPAC is constantly doing on a consistent, regular basis. Something that might gravitate to you, um, that you can check out. And 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be a free offering. And also want to thank TD Bank for and their support for being able to bring such programs such as this to you. So again, go to njpac.org, follow them on Instagram, Facebook, all of the social media sites. There's always wonderful things going. And also, because I am the director of jazz there's so many wonderful arts programs that we offer to young artist citizens. So again, Justin and other young artists here, Benji, please visit us, because all of our summer programs will be virtual. So I'm sure that there may be something there that we'd love to have you join us with, whether it be City versus Jazz and Poetry, a hip hop program, musical theater, our Jerry Allen Jazz Camp. There's a lot of wonderful things there to offer to young students who want to continue the pursuit of art, or just, to just be informed and become more, have a good time. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and as a community, let's take care of each other. Good night, everybody. Peace.